All right, 100 Thieves fans, let's talk, because this past weekend was god awful, and I know what the community response is going to be. I've already seen it on Reddit, and I want to get ahead of it. I don't want to wait until Wednesday to have the rendezvous. I'll be honest with you, I also had my reaction for this series planned out. I rewatched some of the footage of it, and it wasn't all that great. It was a lot of like publicly flaming and bar shit talk, which I don't think put in this context is going to be helpful at all. I think it's just going to be bad content of me shitting on players for the sake of it. Not that that doesn't need to be seen or shouldn't be seen, but I just don't think it's what people need right now in this particular moment. What I think we need to have right now is a heart-to-heart conversation on where things are at and just like taking a moment to breathe. Because yes, this was a, like, even getting back to League of Legends here in a minute, this was a bad weekend for 100 Thieves fans. I'm not going to sit here and gloat as an Optic fan. I understand the pain that 100 Thieves fans are in. I can celebrate my moments separately, and I will talk about that on Wednesday. I have a special thing that I want to do involving shit talk and Call of Duty and all that, and that will have its own individual video. But for 100 Thieves Call of Duty fans, they by all means overperformed expectations for the beginning of the year. Most people didn't think this was a roster that would finish as high as they did at Champs this year, and that's actually something to be really proud of. I know, like, when you put that with the results of everything else, it sucks, especially given that all of this happened over the course of realistically about 24 hours. It's painful. But at the end of the day, you have a COD squad that is young, is hungry, and can grow. For Valorant, sure, tougher pill to swallow. For those that missed the news, Jungle Juice notably tweeted out that all of the players' contracts have been reworked so that they are up in 2024, which is honestly just odd. I mean, just looking at this, we had amendments in our player contract before the season that originally expired in 25. This is due to the uncertainty in the market at the time and was done in all parties' best interest to align short term. So the key takeaway there is align in the short term for all parties, which means one of two things for 100 Thieves if you're up from the Valorant side. It either means that they now have more money that they can pursue, you know, maybe better options, or like a roster that they kind of want to like reconstruct in their own way going into next year. Or it could be the opposite way, where maybe budgets are somehow even tighter, especially after, again, the Nadeshot comments of that them winning didn't sell any more skin bundles. It sucks to not make champs for Valorant, so you have two esports that are now entirely done for 100 Thieves, which leaves the only one remaining of League of Legends. And oh god, were we bad. I promise I will bring this around, but we do need to just talk about how egregious the games were today. I hate to call out specific people, but it's worth saying. Ayla's Leona game in game 1 was one of the worst Leona games that I've ever seen in the history of the LCS. Sorry, Ayla, if you're seeing this. It just is what it is. You know that. I know that. Sniper added Thanatos to the kill list. Great. Phenomenal. Happy that he did. And Quid honestly performed reasonably well against Jojapyun. It just, the problem was, like, once we got into team fights and we just were getting poked out by Tristana, and then Zeri's there to capitalize on kills. Yeah, we stood no chance. Game 2 was like just a disaster from the moment it began, as Bran, I'm not sure how Renekton was able to like wander down there. I guess Sniper didn't want to give out the wave, which fine, but then like, did he not communicate that to River, who then got smite early blue buff, which then gave it to Renekton. Renekton then also gets a kill, and like the game is pretty much over from there, but it just substantially gets worse as bot lane falls behind again, and there was nothing we could do. You had Quid trading kills, getting a solo kill on Jojapyun, like honestly looking not all that bad, but just like we couldn't put it together. There was a worry there for a minute. We were taking bets in the bar of whether we would go down 10k by 17 minutes. And luckily we didn't. We won like a few like smaller fights to kind of like extend it, but we had no real shot in this series whatsoever. It was done and dusted like very early on. It was just bluntly clear that like we could not compete in any way, shape, or form. So all of that's been said. All of the criticism for this series has been put out there. People really shouldn't freak out that much over this. Like, the problem with the League of Legends team right now is, like, we'll get into like the bigger issues aside. Spring gave us false expectations. Like, when you go back and you look at the interview that I did with Golden Glue and the coaching staff and everybody there, like, they were telling us, hey, temper expectations. Like, we're building towards summer. like things are going to potentially be a little bit more rocky. Sniper might take some time to adjust, and he has come back down to earth from like the early solo kills, and he has had issues, but he looked a little bit better today. Quid has obviously overperformed expectations that people had for him. River, I think, ultimately has done fine, but like the meta in summer has shifted entirely away from what made us good. At the end of the day, what made us good was River being able to point and click engage, and Quid and Sniper being able to follow up on that. But now we're at the point where Ayla is the one engaging, River is on AP junglers, and we are not the same level of coordination. And that's just the truth. And unfortunately, that does speak to flaws in our roster and flaws in our system. But like the expectation for this year, despite all of us getting our hopes up, and by all means, I think it's fair to a certain extent to like set the bar at Worlds given what we saw from spring. You would hope that they would grow. That was a pretty high like starting point, a much higher starting point than we thought we were going to be at the beginning of the year, which I don't think anybody can really complain with. But it does make swallowing this pill of knowing that we are probably not going to make Worlds, knowing that we are not at that caliber, a little bit harder because of the glimpses that we saw early on. And given everything else that's happening around the org, I understand why people are going to be upset with that. Also, it doesn't help that like I can come out here and I can give you the messaging of, okay, well, at least for me, I'm still viewing this from the perspective of, hey, this was a building year. This was a year that we look at this squad and we see what parts we can get from it, but we ultimately are going to have to rejigger things as time goes on. This is a budget roster, as was pretty much every team from 100 Thieves this year. We were all budget. And the whole point was just to find a few pieces here and there. That way, whenever we do start getting money, we can actually build towards something. And from the, again, if you take the Valorant news in the most favorable way possible, which is, hey, we're going to build towards something great. That's why we reorganized our contracts to 2024 so that we can retool now that we have money to be able to do all this. Then, hey, maybe it's a good thing. And maybe we will be able to get the pieces that we clearly need for the League of Legends team going into next year. But we should be able to view this as like, you know, honest to God, like telling the truth. We found Quid, we had Sniper, and we have River. What we decide to do with our bot lane going into next year is not a decision you and I are going to make, but I'm assuming one the org is already considering. We need veteran leadership. We need better shot calling on this team. We cannot let River be the only one playing engage, and that's how we play well. We need better shot calling, and we need, quite frankly, a bot lane that's not going to lose every single lane that they play. It's just the truth. But the uncertainty lies with whether we are actually going to have a team or not next year. It is impossible for me to put that messaging out and say like, hey, we'll upgrade pieces next year whenever we don't know. There's not much information coming from the org to provide us clarity on whether we can build that. So the reason why it feels so bad in this moment is because we can't sit here and just be like, yeah, you know what? Fine. We got our pieces. We'll work towards next year. We're all just sitting there like, is there a next year? Is this how we go out? Is this the problem? Like, when you build a roster like this, full of rookies, full of younger talent, with Golden Glue getting his first chance, you want to believe that this is something towards the future. But if this ends up being like the last step before it all disappears, then it's like, wow. In hindsight, really shitty way to go out. Not that Sniper and the guys aren't great. They are, but like, what's the point of going young and building towards something if you were never going to build in the first place? I don't care if situations and facts change around this to kind of dampen the load of like, oh, well, you know, we were going to stay, but then this option and ulterior thing was offered to us and all of a sudden things are better. I didn't want to ask for Twitter opinions on the roster and everything because honestly, I think it's just like a free method for people to dunk on 100 Thieves. And like maybe fans let out some frustration, but I've seen people laying out their frustration already. I don't think I need to like channel that even more. I think at this point what we need is a sense of unity and to like all come together and just be open, honest with ourselves that, yeah, it stung. Yeah, when you look at the esports programs over the last weekend, it sucks that 100 Thieves is the only, or 100 Thieves League of Legends is the only one left, and even then it feels hopeless to a certain extent. But it's been a fun year regardless. Like, look at all the highs that have happened across every program. The Valorant team won a split. 100 Thieves overperformed expectations for a squad that most people didn't have faith in, like provided some really hype moments at champs. League of Legends, I mean, we've been one of the more exciting teams to watch up until these past 2 weeks. Like, focus on the highs. Like, by all means, I will talk about the lows if they continue. We have, notably for the LCS team, FlyQuest next week. Buckle up. Telling you now, this ain't going to get any easier. Like, this is a matchup next week that, like, I'm expecting us to hopefully not lose this bad, but I'm not expecting us to compete all that well either. If Dignitas was able to take a game off of FlyQuest and like have moments where they actually look decent, like we should be able to do the same. Otherwise, like we're not at the caliber where even Dignitas is at. So we'll find out. But you just got to hold on. Hold on for these 2 weeks. I know it's going to be 3 back-to-back losses if we do lose the FlyQuest, and it's going to actually, well, 4 with Dignitas. It's going to feel really bad. But we end the season with Shopify and Immortals, 2 series that we can kind of go out on a high with and at least go into playoffs and like try and build some momentum. But I encourage you to just try and look at these series for as fun as they can be. Don't harp too much on the changes that we all know are going to come. Focus on the positive things. Focus on Quid and Sniper playing well. Focus on some of the plays that River is able to make. The losses are going to sting, but at the end of the day, you know, whether you believe me or whether you believe the org is staying or not, we're a development squad. Got to find the positives. Got to find the diamonds in the rough and then cut the grass a little bit later. I don't know if this message is going to end up being well received or not. I know this is going to be a weird episode of The Rendezvous, but it just felt like it needed to be said. Felt like this is a more important conversation to have in this moment than anything else. So that's it for me on this one. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Drop a like below. And if you're a 100 Thieves Call of Duty fan, might not fully want to watch the video on Wednesday. Unless you're like fine after everything that's happened here. It's going to be a really fun one about shit talk.